Thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen, in for Josh Hinkle. Major tech companies and business groups say they'll take on the Texas Senate again, trying to stop an idea they say single out LGBTQ Texans, and the Texas economy will suffer for it. After a bathroom privacy bill tore state politics apart 2 years ago, hundreds of businesses signed a letter against the proposals they say form a bathroom bill 2.0. One of them would protect state licensed professionals who cite religious beliefs while refusing to serve certain people. Senate Bill 17 comes after reports of counselors in other parts of the country losing their jobs because they refuse to serve same-sex couples, instead referring them to other counselors. The driver of SB 17 says it's a preemptive measure to make sure the state of Texas can't pull someone's license for doing something similar. This issue divides faith groups. People like B. Moorhead with Texas Impact see it as another example of would-be laws discriminating against LGBTQ Texans.
Basically, it's trying to take religious belief, which is a very personal thing, and turn it into kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card.
A variety of people came to the Texas Senate Monday, from lawyers to hairdressers. Some folks want to practice their faith without a threat to their license.
My faith in God is part of who I am. It is the reason that I can love my clients.
The author of the bill, Lubbock Republican Senator Charles Perry, took issue with accusations that it was meant to benefit only white evangelicals.
To actually be able to live our faith, and our living our faith does not stop when we start to work.
But opponents worry about a slippery slope with such open-ended language.
Super broad opt-out for people based on something as poorly defined in law and with reason. So it's not easy to define what constitutes a sincerely held religious belief.
This bill would only apply to occupational licenses. It would not protect people from getting fired or getting sued. This is only one bill. The business coalition known as Texas Welcomes All says there's another. It's one that started out trying to standardize rules statewide for paid sick leave. But a change in wording now has these business groups reversing their positions on it. Small details can make big waves. SB 15 would create statewide rules for leave and benefits. It used to have this text stating plainly it would not overrule local non-discrimination ordinances.
It was at the last minute. They kind of slid that in. We weren't really expecting that.
Chambers of Commerce joined with the groups Texas Competes and Texas Welcomes All to deliver a message of opposition to the change, reinforced with a letter from Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, and scores of other businesses.
To reiterate the united, durable commitment of the Texas business community to building a Texas that is inclusive.
The author of the bill, Republican Senator Brandon Creighton, says it's not his intent to get rid of local non-discrimination ordinances, or NDOs, and that the business groups are being dishonest.
The position taken by those groups is wrong. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about here.
Robert Henneke from the Texas Public Policy Foundation tells me just because the bill doesn't outright exempt NDOs in the text doesn't mean it prohibits them.
The purpose, scope, and focus of the bill has not changed, and that focus is to preempt cities from interfering with the employment choices of private employers and employees.
These business groups are skeptical because these are two priority bills for Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, the same person who led the charge on the bathroom privacy bill 2 years ago. If these pass the Senate, it could set up a showdown with new Speaker of the House, Dennis Bonnen, who has said he will not pass a bill similar to last session's bathroom bill. So why did Senator Creighton take out that non-discrimination in ordinance language? I sat down to ask him that question.
The bill did start out in very broad language, and it had NDO language in it that ultimately I didn't agree was drafted properly. And sometimes when you have language that's not drafted properly, it brings litigation. So we narrowed the scope of the bill to make sure that instead of very broad language, it identified and focused on several targeted issues like sick leave and hiring practices. There's been some speculation that it's bathroom bill 2.0, but I've stated several times has nothing to do, no intention whatsoever of having any policy like that in this legislation.
You're not trying to overrule the non-discrimination ordinances of the city?
No, in fact, you know, taking that language out makes it very clear that the bill has nothing to do with discrimination whatsoever.
Are you open to their ask of putting that language back in there?
Well, I think that it's unnecessary. You know, when we narrowed the focus of the policy to specific employment policies in particular, like sick leave, like hiring practices, scheduling, ban the box, whatever, the policies, when they're narrowed to be a specific target, then the language is no longer so broad that it needs the NDO language in. And in fact, internally within the San Antonio City Council, there's been an opinion issued that the draft of our legislation would not affect their ability to continue to pass non-discrimination ordinances, which what I've been saying all along.
I spoke with Senator Creighton on that topic and many others, including his response to Hurricane Harvey, a bill to create a statewide flood plan. We'll get into that idea, new to Texas, later in the program. First, a milestone moment in the session as House lawmakers passed their version of the budget.
You can't establish policy within the budget, but you can tell a lot by what's in there as to what our priorities are.
But there are still unanswered questions. Up next, we turn to our panel for a closer look at the deals made and the challenges still ahead. When the 150 members of the Texas House picked Dennis Bonnen to lead them, they might have had Wednesday night in mind. Passing the required state budget is one of the loudest, crudest, and most controversial nights in the session. This night, under Bonnen, dare I say, was boring. The Texas House unanimously passed a $251 billion state budget.
You can't establish policy within the budget, but you can tell a lot by what's in there as to what our priorities are. And $9 billion that is dedicated to property tax relief and really transformative changes in the foundation school program is an incredible statement.
The budget now heads to the Texas Senate. For perspective on the news this week, we have our roundtable. Lauren McGahee covers politics for the Dallas Morning News, Emma Pladoff reports for the Texas Tribune, and Andrea Zielinski is the Austin Bureau reporter for the Houston Chronicle. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So, Andrea, let's just start with how we went on budget night from 2 years ago with near fights breaking out to really people leaving agreeable.
Night and day. Last session, there were a lot of fights, a lot of tension, and it wasn't just about the budget. It was a lot about the dynamics. It was about who was speaker. It was about different factions of Republicans and Democrats all fighting for some say of what's really going to happen. So you had just a lot of fights break out throughout the evening. This past week, the budget debate was very different. It was almost boring, which is probably a good thing for taxpayers. There weren't a lot of fights, but that also means that there weren't a lot of debates on issues that people do care about, like whether teachers should be getting across-the-board pay raises or other issues like that.
And let's shift topics to kind of these religious liberty bills, SB 17, SB 15, that have popped up in the Texas Senate again. You know, we have the business community calling these bills bathroom bills 2.0. Kind of, how did we get here, Emma?
Well, we saw 2 years ago the business community really come out against the bathroom bill 1.0, I guess you could say, saying, look, we want to make what they call the economic case for equality, that discrimination is bad for business in Texas. And we see them kind of coming out again on these bills that might have at first blush seemed a little bit more innocuous. We don't have, you know, explicitly excluding transgender people from certain public facilities, but they've made clear our actual major threats to the community.
And Lauren, so when I talk to Senator Creighton for SB 15, he tells me that, you know, he's not trying to do get rid of the NDOs. He doesn't want to do that, and the business community, these business groups, just don't believe him. What's the disconnect there, you think?
So you're right, Senator Creighton, who is authoring one of these bills that's been described as anti-LGBT by business groups. He says this wouldn't undo local protections for gay people, but businesses are saying that's incorrect, that he's reading the policy wrong, and now we're seeing cities come out against it as well. The city of Austin released a statement to us yesterday that says, yes, if this bill passes, it means we wouldn't be able to tell businesses you can't fire someone because they're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. So I think, Senator Creighton's doing his job. He's defending his bill, and the cities and businesses are coming out against something that they say he's misinterpreting. So we're going to have to see whether these bills actually get anywhere in the legislature. To tie it into the budget debate idea, there's been this coming together of the top leaders in Texas in this kumbaya moment, and they're saying they're trying to avoid situations like the bathroom bill. But when bills get filed, like SB 15 and now 4 new bills that look like it, it kind of breaks down that kumbaya moment and introduces really divisive, controversial bills that could cause fights amongst the members.
Emma, the business groups really seem to be organized faster this time around than last time. What was different?
I think we've seen in the past few years these business groups have built up a really strong infrastructure so that they're not kind of caught flat-footed when they see discriminatory legislation that they want to oppose. They're kind of ready, they have their email lists ready to go, they're ready to put out public statements. I think it's an interesting position. We saw a lot of business groups come out for these bills in the first place, Senate Bill 15 in particular, which would override local ordinances like mandating paid sick leave. That's something a lot of business groups oppose at the local level. But when we see new elements introduced to it that advocates say would threaten LGBT communities, they're in this difficult position because they don't want that, but they don't want paid sick leave at the local level either.
Do you think the kumbaya moment will continue, or is there something that you're watching that's going to blow it up, so to speak?
I think there are a couple different places. I don't know if it'll blow it up, but I think it'll cause a big fire on one side and then trying to scramble to hold the whole thing together on the other. I mean, you have various abortion legislation that I think could, if it does get to the floor, can really kind of build up a lot of tension there. You have this bill right here. I think there are a couple different things that you're going to see some fissures on. It's just whether or not they can link arms strong enough to make it until May.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Taking lessons from Hurricane Harvey, how lawmakers are taking steps to help people across the state prepare for the next big storm.
We're better off without red light cameras from a public safety standpoint.
A new chapter in the battle over red light cameras, why the legislature is closer than ever to turning them off in Texas. Devastation from Hurricane Harvey pushed lawmakers to action. The Texas Senate already passed major bills to better prepare for the next big storm. One of them is Senate Bill 7 from Senator Brandon Creighton from Conroe, who we spoke with earlier. His bill would create something we've never had, a statewide flood plan.
So flood plan implementation account?
That's right.
What does that do that we weren't doing before this?
We have a statewide water plan, and it's revered all over the country, but we don't have a statewide flood plan, and I think we're spending a lot of money in recovery because we lack certain planning from flood mitigation efforts, and that comprehensive plan will help us spend less money and be better prepared when the next flood comes, and we know that it's coming, right?
Yeah. What did you think when you found out that Texas, for all the floods that we've had throughout history, we didn't have a flood plan?
Well, there have been regional efforts, and I think the regional efforts with reservoirs and detention areas and dredging in the river basins and other planning that we've done in the past, I think that's been good, but it really hasn't prepared us for what we've seen on 100, 500-year, and 1,000-year flood events like Harvey was designated as. And we need more than a regional approach, and that's what Senate Bill 7 offers.
So what would be involved in these plans?
It would allow for what I would call a Harvey bucket, where within that part of the funding we would assist local governments with their non-federal match. And right now we have an unprecedented amount of federal money that's been authorized but not deployed. And so, for instance, as an example, we've got $600 to $700 million within that bucket to help local government provide its match, and that would draw down $5 to $6 billion in federal funding. That's Texas taxpayer money.
Yeah.
We've been a donor state for too long, and it's time to get that money back to Texas.
And the thinking is that some of these local governments don't have enough money to match to get the drawing funds down. This is the state kind of filling that middle ground.
Yes, and you're right. We don't traditionally play that role. We did with the West explosion, and we did with the wildfires in West Texas. Those are examples of where we have provided a match with the Bastrop fires. But traditionally we haven't. But this is the largest natural disaster in American history, and local governments are not prepared. They don't have the reserves to tackle the kind of flood mitigation projects that it will take to rebuild and also plan for the future. This bill helps with that.
Would that include, I guess the colloquial name for it is the Ike Dike, I guess, there's the big plan to protect the coast, Houston and Beaumont area?
It helps with the bookends of what people refer to as the coastal barrier, but it doesn't do anything to fill in the inner design and engineered layout. I think there's some controversy about exactly what plan to go with, but what there is agreement on is that the bookends that protect the ship channel and the petrochemical complex and the Sabine-Neches areas, we need to be better prepared there.
And the thinking there is if a storm comes in and hits those petrochemical plants, it could get really bad.
And we've come really close to that in prior storms, and we just can't have that happen. I mean, that's Texas economic security, that's really national security that's involved there.
You can catch more of that interview online. Just look for this story under the Texas Politics section of your station's website.
I think we will pass this law and get rid of red light cameras in Texas.
One man and more than 100 lawmakers on a mission to ban red light cameras across Texas. The legal questions that could help the statewide push to turn those cameras off. The battle to ban red light cameras in Texas heated up this week at the Texas Capitol. Nearly 60 Texas cities have red light cameras, and since 2007, tickets from those cameras raked in more than $500 million in fines. Investigator Jody Bard took a deep dive into these cameras a little more than a year ago, and Jody, something I did not know is these things might not even be legal.
Phil, believe it or not, turns out that is the case. Now, before the city ever installs its first red light camera, the city is supposed to perform an engineering study. Now, the law requires that, but our investigation found that only 3 of 60 cities, Phil, actually performed that engineering study, but that hasn't stopped a single city from issuing those $75 fines.
And some lawmakers don't like this. And so what are we seeing at the Capitol this week?
Well, last week, the House Transportation Committee met, and that happened Tuesday. Several cops, though, from cities with red light cameras showed up to try to convince lawmakers not to ban the cameras. The cities argued that those cameras make intersections safer by stopping people from running red lights. But Representative Jonathan Stickland argued red light cameras are unconstitutional. He says vehicle owners should have the right to face their accuser, and you cannot face a camera in court. Now, Stickland's ban bill has huge support in the House. More than 100 lawmakers signed on in support.
It's from all walks of life. We've got left, right, center. Everyone is involved, and that's because the overwhelming voice of the people want these things gone.
You had a lot of basically we don't like them, and I get that, and I wish that we didn't have to have red light cameras. But like we tell everybody in our community and everybody else that'll listen, if you don't want the red light cameras, it's pretty simple. Stop running the red lights, we'll take them out. It's that simple.
That was Leon Valley's police chief, Joe Salvaggio. Now, just last year, his city installed red light cameras at 36 intersections and wrote 62,000 tickets. Those tickets earned the city $1.6 million in fines. Now, the only enforcement is the ability for cities to block vehicle registration renewals if you do not pay one of those tickets. That's called the scofflaw program. But the problem is Leon Valley doesn't have that program and has absolutely no way to force people to pay those tickets. Now, I asked the police chief about that last week at the Capitol. But do you think if people knew that the city of Leon Valley had absolutely no enforcement mechanism to come after them for not paying these tickets?
No, I'd say that most Texans I would tell you that most Texans know right from wrong, and they're not going to worry about that. No, most Texans know when they've done wrong, they'll atone for that, and they're not going to do it again.
If you're not placing registration holds on vehicles, and right now your city can't.
Right now.
Then where's the enforcement? You're just hoping they do the right thing and pay it, I guess.
And 69% of the Texans that have gotten citations do the right thing. The rest of them will catch up when we get the stuff filed with the state. We'll go for collection of that at that time.
Well, Phil, only 24 Texas cities have this program in place. That means any other city issuing red light camera tickets cannot do anything if you don't pay the ticket. And cities can't even issue a warrant for failing to pay these fines, and these fines cannot be reported to the DMV and go on your driving record.
So I would imagine people have this one question, and if this bill passes to ban the cameras, when do the fines stop and the cameras come down?
Well, I'll tell you this, there are two bills right now.
Okay.
There's a bill in the House, a bill in the Senate, and those two bills, the one in the House, though, right now, it would be an outright ban. And that bill is stuck in the Transportation Committee, pending status in the Transportation Committee. But just a few days ago, Senator Hall, who's got the second bill over in the Senate, he stripped a grandfather clause from his red light camera ban, meaning that both bills are now identical. We could see action on these bills as soon as next week. But remember, though, if there are two-thirds support in the House and the Senate, this ban, if these bills pass, would go into effect as soon as the governor signs it.
Interesting. That could happen soon.
It could.
And thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazin. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.